So the Salaryman next to me, he was just like, "Urusai na," just into the air, right? If you have something to say it to my face, right? So I looked at him, I was like, sumimasen. Turned to my friends, was like, hey, tone it down a bit. And like everybody dropped in volume. 20 seconds later, he was like, "Yeah, 本当に今うるさいな." And then I went off on him.
What's up, KoreKara as well? Welcome back to the podcast. This week we talked to Jason, also known as Supersonic. So you might have seen him before. He was featured on Dogen's channel and also interviewed previously by Dogen. He streams on Twitch gaming. He also has an ebook about life in Japan. In this podcast, we talk about his experience learning Japanese, coming to Japan and staying here, and his thoughts on just living in Japan in general.
But you guys know what needs to be done here. We have to collectively destroy the like button and collectively follow us both on Twitter. So let's go get right to it.
All right, so Jason, can you give us a quick background of who you are and where you're at today?
Yeah, sure. What's up? Jason, born in the US, grew up on video games and martial arts, basically. Around 2013, I came over to Japan through an exchange program. It was supposed to only be for a year. Decided, you know what, I like it. So I extended that to actually going full-time to that school, which turned into, well, I'm in Japan, I might as well job hunt, when am I going to get this opportunity again? And found my job, and here I am, 8 years later.
Oh wow, so you never lived outside of Japan again after that?
Yeah, exactly. Like I came to Japan and basically like I went back to visit a couple of times, right? But aside from that, like I've just been here since 13. I mean, it's interesting how it like in my mind how it happened, because a lot of it was just me taking advantage of opportunities given. Especially when I was here as an exchange student, I thought to myself, I was like, I do want to come back. And I could either come back as a tourist, right? But then you have to worry about, all kinds of visas. You have to worry about where you stay. Of course, like Airbnbs, it's a lot of money, right? Or if I just fully transferred in, I was like, all right, cool. I can get to live here under student visa. I can just move into an apartment with some friends, get a part-time job, and, just go ahead and play it out. And then same thing happened with job hunting. I was like, either way, like if I fail job hunting or if I don't do it, either way I'll be going back to America. So literally what's the harm in it? And so I just went for it. And sure enough, like you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. I'm glad I took this shot.
How would you describe your like Japanese level when you were like job hunting or even after your study abroad?
It's kind of in flex actually. I feel like my Japanese as a whole was probably strongest while I was job hunting. I would say I was around like N2, give or take. I was coming directly out of university, which by the way, my university was like an international business university. Like I had Japanese classes there, but it wasn't like a language school. It was a mix of, like 50% Japanese, 50% like 80 different countries, right? So there weren't a lot of people like relatively for the balance wanting to speak English outside of class and just day to day. So I really had to kind of go out of my way to make sure that, hey, I'm learning this language.
So you don't use like Japanese that much outside of work?
I would say I do. It really depends on the day, but I do have, I would say 3 groups of friends, but that's really kind of saying like, is it on or is it off? But I have my, non-Japanese friends that speak predominantly English, or my Japanese friends that want to speak a lot of English. And then I have my Japanese friends that only speak English. And then I have those friends that are like, in the middle. So depending on who else we're with, we'll just switch languages as needed. I could have one week where I go the whole week and basically speak maybe an hour's worth of English. Or I could have a week where, I just almost speak no Japanese other than, talking to somebody at a convenience store or restaurant. So it really just kind of depends.
Yeah, and probably at this point, like you've been in Japan so long, probably nothing like throws you out of left field, right? Or do you sometimes happens?
I would say not too much. I tried to, so actually I was really fortunate before I even got here in the first place. I took about about 2 semesters of Japanese in US, but the teacher that I had was very, very good about teaching us culture and how Japan is along with the language. When I came here in the first place, I didn't have that initial culture shock that a lot of people have. So kind of like working off of that, I had a really solid base. So though I've had my moments where I've been caught, off guard, generally speaking, it's like, oh, okay, I can kind of see this coming, or this would naturally come to this point because of X, Y, and Z.
Do you have any stories of getting like Nihongo Jozu? Does that still happen today?
Oh man, absolutely. So it's funny actually. Despite the whole culture thing of like learning the culture and stuff like that, I came here and I wasn't expecting to be like, I guess, Nihongo Jozu like that. And so somebody would say something and like, or somebody would say something and I would respond like, oh, arigatou gozaimasu. And they'd be like, ah, Nihongo Jozu. I'm like, だけど、でも、ありがとうございますしか言わなかったんだけど. It's like, how do you know how good my Japanese is just by saying thank you? And so like, that was a whole thing. And then I do realize that it was kind of a double whammy. There was a time where I kind of realized that kind of stopped happening. I can't put my finger on it because it's not just like in like full speech. I would have times where I would go to a grocery store and they would say like, they would ask, hey, do you need a bag? And I'm sitting there thinking like, can I carry this in my hands? Can I put one in my pocket? Like, do I need a bag? And they're like, bag. I'm like, no, the language is not the problem. I just really don't know if I need a bag or not, right? But nowadays that doesn't really happen. Like the same question gets asked and I'll be like, and like they don't stop. They don't even, they're like, they understand I'm just thinking and it's not like a communication problem. And I don't know if it's just like how I carry myself or like, how I just navigate. But I think it's just one of those things where even if other people don't know it, they like, people can just innately sense it. That it's like, oh, okay, like, what's going on. So I don't need to worry about like communication.
Becoming more Japanese.
Right. Yeah, you just need to equip the native Japanese aura.
Yeah, exactly. Just like, boom. Like, +10 to social interactions. And also like, I mean, as I know you guys are aware of Dogen and whatnot. Dogen's video was absolutely true. It's like there is a point where people stop telling you Nihongo Jozu and they just straight up are like nannen desu ka? Or in my case, like I remember the first time that somebody asked me if I was half Japanese. And that was the most like that caught me off guard, but that was also like super like that was the biggest compliment that somebody could have ever given me on my Japanese. I was like, what half of me looks half? I mean, thank you. Right? So like that was a cool feeling, yeah.
It kind of reminded me of one other factor that we've actually just talked a lot about recently on the podcast, which is the whole genre of shocking people with your Japanese, right?
Yeah.
And I was wondering if you had any stories of where you would absolutely just shocked people. Like you'd say something like, hey?
Oh yeah, I've definitely, and it's like, I'm not gonna lie, there's times I've weaponized it, like absolutely. Like, not for anything nefarious or anything, but there's just times where I would go to like some outings or whatever. I would be with my friends and they would be introducing me to their group of friends, and like they might be Japanese or like half Japanese, but they speak English. Before we even really get to like establishing what language we're speaking, everybody's just immediately like, oh, nice to meet you. So I'm like, all right, cool, well then we'll just rock with English for a while. Like at some point it'll just be like for example, like at like izakaya or something, right? Like we're all just talking, just having a good time, and then the waiter or waitress comes by, asks us what we want to order, and so I was talking to them. I was like, I'm thinking they're probably getting this, and then just like when it's going around the table, I see them open their mouth to start ordering for me, and so I just beat them to the punch. I just order for myself, and like, you speak English? You speak Japanese? I was like, yeah. It's like, I didn't know. You didn't ask. But yeah, like I think the only one negative time I've had with it actually comes back to the whole kind of something that threw me off guard, or like the culture shock aspect, was one time I was just with a bunch of friends. This was a while back, and we were in a ramen restaurant, and we're all drinking. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning or something. We're all in a ramen restaurant, and so we're all talking, and I think it's like me, 2 people are full Japanese, and the other 2 people are half Japanese, and there's one other like English person. So it's a group of us. So I happen to be on the farthest end of our group because we're all sitting at the counter, right? So we can't, like, we're all lined up. And so on my left side is just, some salaryman, right? Of course, we're all, having a good time, just talking and stuff. We're being loud, right? So the salaryman next to me, he was just like, urusai na, just into the air, right? For me, as an American, it's like, you don't just come, like, if you have something to say it to my face, right?
Right.
But I did know that, like, well, I was drunk too, but I knew that we were being loud. So like, I looked at him, I was like, sumimasen. Turned to my friends, was like, hey, tone it down a bit. And like, everybody dropped noticeably, like, in volume. And then it was like 20 seconds later, he was like, yeah, hontou ni ima urusai na. And then I went off on him. Like, I went off him in Japanese. I was like, I was like, You know I understand you, right? I try to calm down. Don't you think we tried to do something? Like, if you have a problem with me, say it to my face. What? Huh? Oh, you're quiet now, huh? And like, again, I probably was in the wrong at that point because, again, drinking. But that was the one time that I was just like, I think he was just surprised at how much I went off on him in Japanese. Because I just started, and he was like, finished his food and just left. And I was like, but yeah, that's another one of those kind of like cultural things where it's like, you know, for Japanese people, it's like not direct confrontational. You'll say it into the air and everybody's supposed to pick up on it, right?
Until the air strikes back, right?
Yeah, right. That breeze is getting kind of brisk, huh?
Yeah, man, that was pretty crazy. I mean, it's like you took the shocking to the next level, you know?
Exactly. It's like you're shocked. I'm shocked too. I'm gonna give my shockness to you. I think because at the end of it, I was also surprised because I think that was also one of like, you know how like everybody has like milestones when it's like, oh, my language is kind of getting good, right? I could like show a strong emotion in a language that wasn't mine, like off the cuss, right? Because, you know, whenever you're just prepared and just talking like this, you can speak, but like when you get mad and flustered, your own language starts becoming difficult, right? So the fact that I was actually able to keep it together and make coherent sentences, I was like, oh wow, I guess I am getting a little bit better at this, huh?
Like,
yeah, exactly. Right on the shoulders.
Has there ever been like language type things, like either to an advantage or disadvantage in the workplace, you feel like?
Oh, absolutely. Naturally, the disadvantage would be easier just because, you know, sometimes you might not have the words or vocabulary to say stuff, or and thankfully while I was at work, my bosses and stuff were like really understanding, because there would be some times where like we would talk about like some kind of system or something that we're trying to implement into the game, and like, you know, they would say something and I would tell them just straight up. I would just be like, hey, I do not agree with this, but I don't have the language to explain clearly why I don't agree and how I would go otherwise. So if you could give me like 2 hours, or like just next time we have the meeting, I would like to bring this back up with you. And thankfully they'd be like, you know, okay, yeah, sure, go and gather your thoughts, you know, get what you got to say. Because again, like my language got kind of very specific to what I was doing. So there was a lot of times where, you know, I'd be looking at something, like, all right, how do I say, okay, so he turns his upper body 90 degrees. Okay, how do you say upper body? Karada no ue? No, that doesn't make sense. So I'd have to look stuff up, be like, johanshin. Okay, johanshin wa twist. Okay, look that up. Hineru. Okay, tokimoashi, han tokimoashi, and like just all these like very specific motion things that would take me a minute to go ahead and get through, just because, you know, it's not stuff that I was commonly taught, or people are commonly taught in the textbook, right? So that was one thing. Also, on the other hand, like because of just being bilingual, to no fault of anybody, I think it's just anybody who is not on the way to bilingual doesn't really understand this. But there's a real big misconception, I think, that like, oh, you speak these two languages, therefore translating this should be no problem for you, right? It's like, so they'll give you work on top of your work because, oh, you speak both languages, so you just get it done. It's like, no, because even localization, like localizing it aside, getting like, you know, that kind of stuff together, it's like you still have to be like, all right, well, you know, this type of phrase just doesn't make sense to, like, you know, if I were to translate it one-to-one. So now I have to figure out like what this is trying to say, how these sentences, because there's also times where it's like the sentence structure itself, like you'll see a sentence in Japanese that just works better as two separate sentences, but like if you're just doing it one-to-one, then it just becomes this kind of weird, awkward run-on sentence. And so I would say that's kind of like that can be a somewhat of a detriment if translating is not your main job. You'll just get translating work because, oh, you speak both languages, so it's easy for you, right? Which is absolutely not the case, right?
Right. Like there's a lot of words that don't have like a one-to-one.
Exactly.
Yeah, we were just discussing this on a different podcast. Like we talked to this one guy who allegedly he claims to be native level, but then we tested him. We were like, we were just talking about this word controversy, and I was like, oh, how do you say it in Japanese? And he couldn't think of it. Like maybe you can think of the Japanese word that means controversy. You've been in Japan longer.
Oh my gosh. See, I'm not gonna lie to you. I feel like if I heard it, I would be able to somewhat be like, oh, that I could kind of ballpark it. But like, you know, off the top of my head, I cannot think of the word for controversy.
Right. Alright, this is
Controversial.
has to be a
This is
name.
controversial. There is no word for controversy in Japanese.
Also, like there's no one word for procrastination in Japanese. Like
Right.
the idea of procrastination, you have to break it up into two separate things. It's either like you get distracted by a whole bunch of other things, or you're just putting something off because you don't feel like doing it. But procrastination encapsulates both of those terminologies. So like
Maybe
you can just
Japanese
say
people just
that.
they don't procrastinate.
Yeah, this is
Yeah,
not
yeah,
within our vocabulary.
It just makes it hard sometimes. Like I like to play with language when I can, and so sometimes it's like I'll have like a very specific feeling or a very specific thing I want to say, and I'm just like, I don't know how to say this, and then I wind up asking like 4 different people and come to the conclusion of, oh, this just the idea of this alone doesn't exist in Japanese, let alone a word for it. Though I did look out, my favorite English word also has a Japanese equivalent.
What's your
What's
favorite
the
English word?
favorite English word?
So in Japanese, it's sogai hoshitsu. In English, that's defenestration. Defenestration is
Okay.
the act of throwing something or someone through a window.
Yeah, I can visualize.
Specifically
every
through a
day.
window.
It's an oddly specific word to have a direct one-to-one translation.
Oh god, I love that word. I used to threaten my little brother with that word all the time.
Oh, yeah.
I'd look at my mom and I'm like, Mom, I'm about to defenestrate this kid.
So did it come up at work a lot?
Actually, working on a fighting game, it hasn't not come up at work.
Yeah, it seems like your character would defenestrate a lot of people.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's freaking like it's a great word. I love it.
I'm gonna have to start using that word more often.
Please do.
Start-
Please do.
Make sure to defenestrate the like button.
You're right.
Oh yeah, let's go.
Yeah, don't smash it, like defenestrate it. I like the way you think. Let's go for it.
That's right, bro. Let's get it.
I guess like on like the cultural side of Japan, have you ever had a moment or experience where like you felt like, oh, I kind of want to leave Japan? Because I feel like the people we've talked to who live in Japan a long time, there's always like a turning point where like they could leave and they do leave, or they could leave, they didn't leave, and then they just like stay in Japan.
I think make that question a little bit harder to answer straightforward than not, just because the way I look at my time in Japan is that, just to summarize it, is like my adventure's not over. I really just kind of look at everything as a chance, like kind of, coming to Japan was a chance, like, transferring full-time into the school was like, the opportunity's there, let's take the chance. Job hunting, the opportunity's there, let's take the chance. So I think because of that, like, I don't settle, I guess. I don't know how to put it in a way that doesn't make it sound like I'm trying to pat myself on the back so much I might throw out my elbow.
They're kind of
But
like
yeah, it's
quests
like-
in a video game or something, and you still have
yeah,
quests.
exactly. That's the thing. It's like I'm basically just stuck on side quests, and if the main story happens to run into it, then let's go for it. That's basically the best way I can put it.
Your arcs, like it's the filler right now, but the main story's gonna come and hit it soon.
Exactly.
And you're gonna be the next
Exactly.
big arc.
So yeah, like I mean that's really just how I treat my entire life. There's always been the inkling and like the option of, going back to America, obviously. I do kind of factor that into my just how I guess set everything up. I guess in still a gamey way, but I always would tell myself that like I want to set up my life as like a game of chess. So in a game of chess, you don't try to make one checkmate. You set up a whole bunch of different possible checkmates. So that way, if options A and C fall through, hopefully you still have B and D, right? So I think with that kind of thinking, I really haven't had a huge turning point of like, this makes me want to go home. There's definitely been times where I felt like, X, Y, and Z is hot nonsense. And I definitely do feel like I am well outside of the honeymoon period of thinking that, oh, Japan's such a beautiful place, everybody's so nice and stuff. It's like, no, there's like tatemae and there's all kinds of nonsense. But when I think about it, America has all kinds of nonsense in it too. There's not going to be any place that I go on this planet that after a while I'm not going to realize how just ridiculous humans are, because humans just be doing human things, right? So again, just a really long-winded way of saying like, I've had moments where I would think like, oh man, like it would be easier. For example, like it would be easier if I worked at a company where English was a primary language, right? I like driving. And so it'd be easier for me to go back to America if, I wanted to go ahead and get a car and just be able to drive around, right? The way I say it is the good outweighs the bad by a long shot. Even though like, kind of annoyances do crop up, I have so many awesome and fun stories that I've just run into just because I'm a foreigner in Japan, that it's like, yeah, my adventure's not yet over. I'm still running these side quests and I'm enjoying it.
Jason, I think this is the perfect time talking about side quests, adventures, arcs. I know this is something you've been working on because you know it's time for the KoreKara message. I know back from America, all the way to studying abroad, to getting your job, all the way learning Japanese, and now working up your way to this point, the one main quest, the main quest of them all was to create the perfect KoreKara message. So I know it is that time. So I'm gonna go put the bright lights on you here, Jason. I can't wait to hear it. I mean, I know how long you've been working on it. So let's hear it, man.
So it's gonna be a two-pronged message. The first message is kind of just what I was saying earlier. Just try stuff. If you want to do something and you have the means to go about doing it, do it. Especially if you weigh the benefits versus like the possible, oh, what can happen if I fail, right? Like they always tell you, if there's like some guy or girl that you like, ask them what's the worst that could happen. They say no thanks, and then you just move on with your life, right? Like I've heard so many times of like, oh, I want to go to Japan, but I want to try this, but I want to learn this, but just make sure that but is not just you trying to protect your own ego. Because a lot of times it's really easy to say, I don't want to try because I don't want my ego to get bruised by failing. But if you never fail, then you probably haven't really succeeded. That's message one. Message two, I would also say, humans are human. Like there's kind of on the same thing. People talk about like, oh, people in Japan this, people in Japan that and stuff. What I found is, especially like people just asking me like, oh, how do you make friends in Japan? It's like, well, try being a decent person. That seems to work for most human beings on this planet. Like cultural things aside, like, that might get in the way here and there. But for most part, when you say thank you, when you show appreciation to somebody, like they'll be happy. If you punch somebody in the stomach, they're probably going to hold the stomach and double over. Like humans are humans. So don't forget that and just make sure to treat everybody the way you want to be treated.
All right, thanks for making the end of the podcast. Comment down below if you've seen Jason on Dogen's channel before.
But of course, we got to go shout out our patrons: Cedric, Roy, Faraz, Kevin, Allen, Darren, Drew, Jack, Joey, K90, Meredith, MKSXN, Polar, Suzu, Yui, Sad Boy, and Brit vs. Japan.